Welcome to Bridging the Gap. I am one of your hosts, Cooper Green. Today, our episode will be more centered on family advocacy, and today I'm sitting here with Christy Peterson and Camille Larson. Will you guys please introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Camille Larson. I am the Vice President of Revenue Operations for Utah Behavior Services. I oversee authorizations and billing, our wonderful family advocate here, so we kind of run the whole gambit when it comes to things involved with revenue operations.
And I'm Christy Peterson, and I'm the family advocate for Utah Behavior Services. So any family that needs to be connected with their different resources or really just anything they need, they can be directed to me, and I can help them find a way to solve the problem or help enhance their quality of life.
That's wonderful. And how long have you guys been working here?
Oh, I think I'm hitting 12 years this next year, somewhere along the lines.
And I'm hitting my 4-year mark in November.
Mm-hmm. And then I just recently, didn't UTBS just fill in the family advocate position?
Yeah, so this is a brand new position. I filled it in April or May.
Yeah, and the backstory of that was we started with appeals, and we had a wonderful appeals specialist, and we noticed that not only were there needs for the appeals, but there was also needs outside of appeals as far as resources and getting connected with Medicaid and how to apply for Medicaid. And so then we had this dream of having a person that would be able to not only help with the appeals with the insurances as far as getting authorization, but billing as well for claims that were denied for whatever reason. But also, if they needed help finding schooling for their kid or needed to get applied for Medicaid, she could also kind of help them out with those kind of ideas. And so we expanded the position and landed Christy, and it's been a great addition.
So Camille, with your 12 years of experience in the behavioral healthcare field, why do you feel like you want to continually advocate for these families? Or what's like the biggest needs right now and challenges that you are seeing?
So my why would be it fires me up when I see a benefit not being applied correctly or a situation that seems unfair or unjust. No family is black and white. No needs are one size fits all. And so it fires me up to be able to find the resources that fit to their specific need or the solution that helps benefit them specifically, rather than a broad term or a broad blanket effect, I guess. And I think what still needs work is people knowing what's available for them, and that just because they pay a premium every month doesn't mean that they just have to take whatever is given to them, that there's other avenues for them to be able to explore to have those needs met. And I think that there's a lack of communication or a lack of putting it out there for them of what those resources are. So that's kind of what our mission is to gather up those resources and spread them as far as we can so that people can advocate for themselves. We are always happy and willing to advocate for them, but if they can advocate in line with us, that's even more powerful, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Christy, why did you become the newest family advocate for UTBS?
Yeah, and I think that my whole life I've really just wanted to advocate for anything, honestly. I like to give a voice or let people know that they have a voice. As a small child, like 5 years old, I was fascinated with sharks. I'd watch them on the TV and I'd learn all about what makes them them. And then I would tell my whole family about it and be like, look, they're trying to kill all these sharks and they don't even know about them. And then as I grew older, yes, I still love my sharks, but what I learned about myself is that I love to do that for people as well. You take a vulnerable population and you get to know them, and really you get to connect the story to something bigger, right? You get to go out to someone else and be like, hey, this is what's happening with them. This is what it's doing to them. And now listen to their story and hear how inspiring it is. Don't you want to help them out or help them get a better quality of life? That's really my why, is I want people's voices to be heard, especially when people might be encouraging them to not use their voice.
Yeah, and as far as I know, you are an RBT as well. Can you explain what an RBT is and how that plays your role into advocacy as well?
Yeah, so an RBT is a registered behavior technician. They work under the direction of a BCBA or a board certified behavior analyst. And what we do is we implement the programming that the BCBA has established. So the BCBA comes in and says, this is what they need to work on, and you get to go figure out how. We teach skills, right? But oftentimes a crucial role of the RBT is to get to know that client and what they really enjoy. And so you can adapt what you're teaching to the client, the child, in a way that's intriguing to them, right? So if I have a client that really likes fish and I'm trying to teach him about friendship, I might use fish as a story to engage that child. And it's a really rewarding position. Through my RBT skills, I've learned how to really connect with people on their level.
Which is necessary in order to be able to advocate for their specific needs, right?
Right.
Right. And I can see how like it starts with the RBT where you're working with their client, you're figuring out what like you're seeing their needs the most, then you work with the BCBA, and then is that where the chain of advocacy work up to the families and insurance and so on?
I mean, it's all definitely interconnected, but the way that it gets to Christy and I would be multiple different ways, right? So a lot of the appeals stuff starts with authorizations with insurance when they're looking to start services or to continue services, or they have had services rendered and then a claim comes back denied. We'll fight for that claim to be paid on so the family doesn't end up incurring that cost. And then other ways they come to her are?
Yeah, so people will talk to people they trust, right? And a lot of our BCBAs, our other mental health clinicians, they build those relationships with the families, and the families turn to them as like, I don't know what else to do. I'm really stuck. I'm really struggling here. I'm struggling with my child's school. They're saying certain things that they won't put into the IEP. And the BCBA is like, cool, I'm a behavior analyst. I don't know anything about the school, right? And that's really where I play a part is they say, hey, they've been vulnerable and they've expressed this to me. Can you help them? And then my role would be to go in and help them with understanding their IEP or how to advocate for different things in their IEP.
What's an IEP?
An IEP is an individualized education plan. So it's to help support the kiddo in a school setting.
And does that go from K to 12?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, an IEP is a resource that a parent can go to for their child. Is there any other resources where like what other beneficial resource have you guys noticed that's been very helpful?
Yeah, so one of the most beneficial resources that I've come into contact with is the Utah Parent Center. So the Utah Parent Center is an organization where parents of those who have different disabilities or mental health illness, they will come in and help walk you through the process of getting different resources, right? So they're really a connector to a whole plethora of different resources. They'll come in and advocate alongside of you, be a friend with you. They can help with DSPD funding. They can help with those IEPs that we were talking about, how to get that support. They're really just a really good resource for our parents, especially starting out and not knowing where to turn to.
So if a parent were to go to the Utah Parent Center website, where could they get started? Like if they need some advocates or if they need some assistance or if they have no idea where to start, what's the best way for them to get started?
Yeah, so they have contact information on there. They also have a resource tab just up at the top where you can see a whole bunch of different resources that they offer. To be honest, what I would do is I would just contact them. They will connect you with a person. You tell them like, this is what's going on, this is what I'm experiencing, and then they help tailor the best response or the best resources for that specific family. Kind of like Camille said earlier, no family is the same, right? It's not black and white. We really have to make sure that we're individualizing it to the family, and that's exactly what the Utah Parent Center can help do.
Get them in touch with a specialized advocate for their individual concerns.
Right.
So are you guys ever in contact with team members or employees that do work for the Utah Parent Center, or like how does that work on your guys' end?
Yeah, so they offer several different classes on various topics. I've attended a lot of their classes, and I'm currently enrolled in a course to help learn more about different resources. These are offered to anyone and they're free of charge.
Yeah, and they are also a nonprofit organization, so they do rely heavily on funds from the community. They do have their annual charity event coming up on October 5th at the Topgolf that we'll be a part of, and hopefully we'll be able to further our relationships with them.
Given your guys' experience and time that you spent for advocacy, what's the most frequent asked questions that you guys get from parents, clients?
Most frequently asked questions, I would say there's typically questions on how their claims have been processed through their insurances, whether it's primary or secondary. So it's always important that they're keeping their coordination of benefits updated with both their primary and secondary if applicable. That helps take care of a handful of roadblocks that we come up against. Another thing is making sure that their insurance is up to date as they change insurances. If one ends and another one begins, they need to make sure that they're communicating that with us, because we aren't notified by their insurances, which may seem like that should be the process, but it's not. The only way we typically hear about that is through the clients. And so if they can communicate that up front, it would help with some roadblocks. Another roadblock that we come up against pretty regularly is mental health parity, which is basically a law that ensures mental health and behavioral health benefits are applied evenly across the board in line with medical benefits. So they can't apply mental health benefits differently than they apply medical benefits. So their copays have to be the same. They can't change the copay depending on the place of service. What other common questions have you had?
I typically have questions that go into their benefits with their insurance companies. And I've been able to go in and help them learn more about their insurance company, and have made some phone calls with the family and their insurance company to ensure that they were getting the benefits that they have.
Yeah. Christy does really great to dig into their individual plan benefits and make sure that it's being applied correctly. Like she's saying, that it's being applied the way that they thought it was supposed to be applied when they signed up for those benefits. Another big roadblock that we're currently navigating is transportation for our clients. Christy's been spearheading that.
Yeah, so one of the biggest problems, like she said, is the transportation piece, right? How do we get our kiddos into services? They do offer, different insurances offer transportation stipends, but oftentimes this isn't even enough to cover the gas to get there, let alone the time that families are spending just to get their kid to services every single day.
This is especially a problem in our remote locations, because sometimes our clients are having to travel upwards of an hour one way. So by the time the family gets them to services and then goes home, it's about time to come back and get them from services and go home, and to navigate a potential full-time job if both parents have to work in the middle of all that transporting. And our employees are typically not able to go in and pick up the child, because by the time they make it out to their house and bring them back into the center, and then have to take them home and bring them back and come home themselves, typically the day is pretty well spent in driving. So,
and that's even granted that the family has access to a car. What about our families that don't have access to a car?
Right.
How are they supposed to access our services? So that's a really big barrier that we're seeing, and there's lots of potential solutions. However, it's seemingly like, yeah, that fits best case scenario, but what about tailoring that to the individual family?
And that's what I was going to ask about, family transportation. And that's even if they have a car. Is there any other support besides a stipend, or is that just the main method of support for?
Depending on your insurance, sometimes they'll offer some sort of non-emergency transportation service. But again, there's a lot of limitations with that. For liability reasons, typically they require for the child to not be transported with the parent, that child be at least 16 years of age. And this works again for your medical doctor checkup, where your appointment is 45 minutes. The parent can go with the child, right? And that's not a huge chunk of time. It is, and it's only once in a blue moon, right? Once a year, mostly. But we have services every single day.
Yeah.
And like she mentioned before, we do work with a vulnerable population, and not very many parents would feel comfortable putting their kid in a car with with a strange person, So there's just a lot of barriers that we're still trying to work through as far as transportation goes.
So earlier you mentioned co-pays with the insurance. How is that? How comparable is that to let's say, since we're in the behavioral health care field, how's that compared to medical or other services? Is it Can you expand on that?
So, according to the Mental Health Parity Act, insurances are supposed to be applying copays the same as the medical copay. So if it's $20 for a medical visit, then it should be $20 for a behavioral health care visit as well. Something that we have seen is copays depending on the place of service. So we offer services in the center. We also offer services at their home. We meet the client where, oh my gosh. We meet
wherever the services are needed.
Wherever the services are needed, that's where we provide services. And so oftentimes the place of service code, home versus office, is applied differently. So there'll be $20 for the office, but $50 if we provide services in their home, which obviously can be a very big financial burden for those families, especially if their client is coming 5 days a week. Those add up. So the home copay should be matching with the office copay, and it should be tying back to the medical copay as well.
Got you. So it should be same across the whole board, and you guys are seeing some inconsistencies.
It's definitely fewer and further in between. I think we're all getting better because I think ultimately that's the goal. We're all trying to work towards a better solution for all parties involved, right? And so I think that it is getting better, but there's always room for improvement. So that's what we're working on.
Well, and I think it's important to highlight too, like when we advocate alongside of our families, we're not trying to come across as confrontational. Right. We're not attacking those insurance companies or other resources that maybe aren't following those laws. More so, we want to bring attention to it, right?
Correct.
Maybe they don't know that that's a violation, right? And so what we really want to do is we want to say, hey, we noticed this, and
correct.
Did you know about this?
Yeah, we definitely try to take a more collaborative approach when working with resources and with the insurance funders and with our clients, because again, we are a resource. We ultimately are a resource for them. And so the collaboration is very important for us to maintain those relationships.
Well, it's wonderful to see the connection of getting the family that they need and bridging that gap. Do you guys have any personal experiences where, like, what can you guys describe a time where you had to advocate for your family's needs? That way our listeners can kind of see.
I think a big thing that we've touched on is no two families are the same, right? And so when you look at a family, maybe the need that they have, there's not an immediate resource available for it, right? And you try, like, can a government resource help with this? No. Can the insurance help with this? No. Can maybe
UTBS can help that
right?
With.
Not always, right? And so you really have to start to get creative. And I did have an instance where none of the immediate answers to their problem were apparent. And so what I did was I more so looked at what that family needed and looked up some nonprofits in their area that had a mission statement that fit their need. And ultimately, although it wasn't the same thing that they might need, I said, hey, this is your mission statement. This is the problem. Can you see how it kind of relates? And how could you help them? The thing is that there are people in our communities that want to help. They just also don't know how to get into contact with people that need help. And vice versa, you have families that need help and don't know how to get connected to those resources that can help, especially if it's not very apparent that they could help. And so that's a big, one of the examples that I can share that I've been able to do is be a little bit more creative in how that is, how that resource helps them.
Well, that's wonderful. It's able to see you guys clear that up. Has there ever been any issues with, let's say, like professionals itself? Has there ever been issues with unqualified professionals helping families versus qualified?
I have families where I have families that will come to me and I'll offer them here's this resource, this resource, this resource. And they'll say, yeah, I've tried and we were turned away. And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, I was turned away because my kid is too XYZ. That happens a lot, actually. And it's really discouraging because you have a family that's like, hey, I've reached out for help and I'm too bad, right? My family's too horrible. They can't even help me. And so I do think as professionals in this field, we do need to be mindful of that regardless of where you work, right? We have to be mindful of hey, they're coming to us because they have nowhere else to go. Instead of looking for reasons why we can't help them, why don't we focus on the one reason that we can?
And the skills needed for them to succeed. Instead of just putting a blanket term of you're too bad, you're too horrible, how can we say, well, these are the skills that you do have, let's expand on those, and so that additional resources can potentially be available for you.
Instead of, it seems like we've been centered on insurance and the system. I'm just curious if there was any issues there as well that could play a role to advocacy.
I think that any organization you run into, there's going to be limitations. We're right. Human, right? Yeah. That's normal. I think that we all just need to have a growth mindset on how we can improve going forward, because we do work with such a vulnerable population.
Yeah. Definitely. All right, how can we talk about restriction on services?
Well, that would tie back up to the mental health, and because the restriction on services would come into the hour the limitations that they apply. So they'll put you can have ABA services, but you can only have 600 hours. And if the treatment team has determined medical necessity to be at 30 hours a week, that 600 hours gets eaten up really fast. And it's if you don't put a restriction on medical services, you're not going to go in and say, okay, well, you can have insulin, but I'm only going to give you 30 vials of insulin. You can't apply those limitations over on the behavioral healthcare side either. And so I think those are the biggest service limitations that we still run into fairly consistently, is that they try to put a cap on how many days you can and have services, or how many hours you can have services up to. So typically they'll go through those 600 hours by March, and so they're left 9 months out of the year with no services available to them, it's not very beneficial for their treatment if they're taking 9 months off every year for these services. But I would say that's probably the biggest treatment limitation that we still run up against.
All the information you guys provided now, let's just say there's a family that's just getting started. You got a mom, dad, whatever. Where do they even start? Because there's a lot of information to process here. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. Where can they even start?
I would personally say with your insurance. And the reason I would say with your insurance is because typically they have a list of in-network providers. They'll also be able to tell you what your individual benefits are, as far as if it's a covered service, how many hours, so on and so forth. And if you have a diagnosis, it would also look a little different, because if you don't have an official autism diagnosis, sorry, you distracted me. If you don't have an official autism diagnosis, then you'll have to go through the process of receiving one of those. And so I would say definitely with your insurance would be where I would recommend that you start.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm going to share a story really fast. Well, it's of a study that was done back in the 1950s with Harvard University. And it was done with some rats, and rats are known for swimming really, really well, right? And this professor, he wanted to know how long a rat could just swim, right? And so what he did was he took these rats and he put them in buckets of water, and he timed to see how long they would last. And they lasted about 15 minutes before they were just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And he wanted to know if he pulled them out, dried them off, gave them a little bit of cheese, what would happen? And so in his second experiment, he again put the rats in the water, and once they started to show signs of struggling or need, he pulled them out, dried them off with a plush towel, gave them cheese, let them dry off, and then he put them back into the water. And before, in that first experiment, it was 15 minutes that they could last, right? Well, in the second experiment where he pulled them out, dried them off, gave them a little bit of cheese, they lasted 60 hours.
Wow, 60 hours?
60 hours, yeah. And so if you're relating that experiment to, you're drowning in your life's problems, right? You just feel like you can't get an escape. What you really need is a support system, someone that will dry you off, give you some cheese, and then also be willing to encourage you while you're swimming, right? So that support system, building up your friends, a good team of professionals, that can be there for you so that you can last and really endure.
Well, if a parent just getting started, how do wait lists play into this? What can a parent expect for wait lists?
I can't speak necessarily to the wait list just because I'm not at the centers. I don't run a center. However, I do know that the availability depends on their schedule, their benefits, the location, their individual needs and hours. So if they have questions regarding the wait list, I would probably refer them back to the center for those answers.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this field in general, we have a lot of wait lists no matter what organization or resource you're going to. And so I'd really just encourage families when they're calling to be really open and honest about what they're experiencing, right? A lot of times, myself included, when I'm talking to someone and say I need help, I try to downplay it, right? I'm like, yeah, things are bad, but it's not too bad. And really what organizations need to know is just how much it's affecting you. So just be really honest and clear about what's going on. Sometimes it's like, yeah, my child's not getting out of bed in the morning, and you can think, oh, well, my grumpy teenager doesn't either. But if this child's refusing to get out of bed in the morning and now you're late to work, ultimately that's going to affect your income, right, and your ability to provide for your family. And so being able to jump into, why does your teenager not getting out of bed in the morning? How does that affect you?
And I feel like the flexibility, sometimes it's easy to say, well, I have to have 4 to 7. I have to have these specific hours. But if you're willing to be a little more flexible on your availability, that could change things as well.
As for UTBS, I know every year in February, there's an event called Hearts on Hill. I've heard a lot of great things about it. Can you guys explain what Hearts on Hill it is and what the purpose of it is?
Yeah, I know that it's a way that Utah Behavior Services likes to build those relationships with the legislators so that we can work on implementing change where necessary. And so they typically have clients choose to create Valentines for the legislators, upon their specific legislators, and they go with their staff up to the Capitol and hand them out and say thank you for the hard work and your advocacy for us. And that's pretty much all I know about it.
Yeah, and as an RBT, last year I was able to go with one of my clients up to Hearts on the Hill, and it was really cool to see the connections made between, you know, these children and the legislation.
They were able to meet their constituents and build relationships with them because they come from their counties and cities.
Yeah, it really establishes like a personal connection, right? The legislators, when we go and talk to them about what our families are experiencing, they can say, oh, well, I've met some of your clients, and they can put faces with
individual
problems.
Stories.
And it's helping them conceptualize and put things into perspective and like really realize like
this is a human being that we're working with, not a number.
Not a number and not just another problem to be solved, but a real life.
If a client, let's say they look at their insurance benefits, if autism services are not included, what's the next step that they can take?
If they contact their insurance and it's not a covered plan and they're on their employer's insurance and they have individualized plan under a third-party payer, they can contact their HR department and advocate to have autism services included in their plan. It typically won't come into effect until the following year when their plan resets. But that's always a resource that they can start at the HR department and advocate. And if they need assistance advocating and writing up a letter to their HR department or how to word it to their HR department, they're always welcome to email Christy here, and she can help create a letterhead and fill it with their individual needs and help them advocate for that through their HR department. Another thing to take into consideration is when open enrollment does become open again for their employers, to make sure that they're looking into those insurance benefits, because sometimes they'll have 3 different plans. One of them includes autism services and the other 2 don't. So they just need to pay attention to their individual needs. And again, if they need help navigating that, then they can reach out to Christy here as well. So if the client reaches out to their insurance company by calling the number on their insurance card and they realize that it's a self-funded plan, that means that their employer is in charge of the benefits that's included with that. So they're always welcome to reach out to their HR and advocate for those services to be included on the next open enrollment period. And if they need help navigating that, they're more than welcome to reach out to Christy and she can help provide direction.
Hey, well, I want to thank you guys for coming here and doing the podcast today. I hope our listeners today will gain a better perspective on advocacy and bridging that gap between the family's needs and the services. Do you guys have any resources that you would like to list?
I just want to end with, I know it may seem hard. It may seem like, the rat analogy that Christy had mentioned earlier. And while we may not be perfect in our advocacy efforts, we sure believe in it. We are so passionate about it, and we will give it everything that we have. And if you don't feel, period. That's it, period. We'll give it everything we got.
Yeah, I think just want to reiterate that, like, it's okay to reach out. It's okay to say, hey, I need a little bit of guidance or help with this. That's what we're here for. And like Camille said, we're going to give it everything we got.
We're going to problem solve the heck out of it, right?
Yeah, we are.
Cool. Well, I guess that's it for you guys. Listeners, if you guys are listening to this podcast right now, please check out etabehaviorservices.com. We do have a resource tab on our website. If you go down to insurance assistance, we have some FAQs, we have some questions. Please check that out. For more information, please check out our description below. Also, to learn more about us, please check out our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And thanks for tuning in.